Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this edition of Business Spotlight. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce you this afternoon to Paul Gallie from PMG Architecture. Hello, Paul. How are you?
Hi, Natalie. Good afternoon.
So, Paul, really looking forward to this interview with you and learning more about you and about PMG Architecture. Perhaps let's start with that. Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself, about the business, and how long you've been in business for?
Yeah, sure. PMG Architecture really was sort of started about full time about 3 years ago. I've got 22 years experience now. Starting from working as a sort of trainee in a large sort of architectural practice, working on sort of shopping centres to gradually work for various different businesses, from high-end private residential for super high net worth individuals to developers, more sort of niche and bespoke, to the likes of Red Row Homes, sort of a premium sort of large house builder. I've done a variety of different disciplines from concept to completion, really. Right. So I'm sort of more of a project architect as such, I guess. I look at the design, initial concept, and also produce the technical design and contract administration and project management, looking at the whole story for a client, right, from concept to delivery, all of the various considerations in between. So I set up the business to start working for private individuals, designing one-off bespoke houses for them, and also looking at working with developers to help sort of maximize their GDV and return on investment, and commercial clients in terms of sort of project management and schools, and providing the expertise for design and delivery on that sort of front as well. So it's good.
And so, Paul, you mentioned a few things there which might partly answer my next question, which what makes you stand out from, your competitors and in the sector that you work?
I think architects get a lot of stick for trying to find clients to fund their ideas, and it's never been the case for me. So I design for my clients, taking on board their sort of design brief, whether it's a creative focus, but in my experience, every client has a budget and their own drivers and goals, and it's about understanding what those are and tailoring our service to meet those, within, designing to a brief, to provide the creative response required for the project, but also give them the professional advice in terms of sort of delivery and all of the regulations that need to be sort of considered in terms of sort of costings to sustainability, to make sure that sort of GDV ends up being met.
There's quite a lot of complexity wading through all of those regulations, and particularly things now, you say, like sustainability as well. I guess it's changing quite a bit. Does it as the months go?
Biodiversity net gain's a huge one. So now we're now looking at sort of plus 10% on sites, which on larger sites for strategic land, it's not so much of a problem. You're more likely to have a corner of the site which is undevelopable anyway, and that can be sort of left and maximized in terms of sort of biodiversity to help tip the balance for sort of plus 10%. But it's the smaller sites which makes things difficult. We've developing a site for a client, a very challenging site for 3 houses, and it's got a underground chamber to it, beneath the surface, and it's got trees, TPOs, it's got every issue going.
Oh, right.
But there isn't the space to add, enhance the biodiversity on these sort of smaller sites. So I think planning's become a lot more technical. So rather than just sort of looking at the concept and the design, you've got to look at the sustainability, how the site drains, and yeah, how you can sort of bring all of those aspects together. Obviously, all the client's interested in is the design, but we have to think about all of the other things in order to sort of come up with something which is, yeah, deliverable and yeah, bring it together for them.
Do they sometimes think that you're introducing those rules, or do they quickly appreciate it? You're just working with all this complexity that you have to deal with.
Yeah, I think most people's opinion of planning is they expect it to be an aesthetic consideration, when actually, you know, it's about form, scale, and mass, and sustainability, and all of those other sort of technical issues need to be sort of met way before looking at, is it the right height? Does it look right in the street scene?
Yeah.
How does that sort of work? I mean, yeah, it's a consideration, but there's a huge amount of work that sort of goes into it. Yeah, it's a challenge, but you know, we like those sort of technical challenges. That sort of makes it interesting. So.
Well, great. That really helps me understand about what you do and about how you do get to yourself to stand out. So, Paul, you've been in business 3 years. So, what's that journey been like so far?
Well, it's been more exciting because of the pandemic, I think. But
yeah,
it's, you know, right when we thought business has boomed really because of the pandemic, I guess. There was coming out of the lockdown, there was a bit of a bottleneck. I guess lots of projects which were sort of put on hold and then all of a sudden exploded into someone wanting to do applications. I think that one of the largest sort of challenges is the planning at the moment. You know, the pressure on local authorities, they just don't have the bodies to process applications. They're under so much pressure to get them done that they won't talk to us anymore. And what should be an 8-week process or 13 weeks, you know, is often been 12 months. And that's a very emotional journey for us to try and manage clients' expectations through to the end, when actually there's nothing we can do about it. It's about all we can do is submit the applications and work through and answer the queries and questions when they eventually come up. And yeah, it's a huge problem going forward, and I don't really sort of see it improving much. And
has that been something particularly developed during the pandemic and got worse, or has it always been there?
It's most local authorities, some have always been a little bit on the slow side, but never ever has it been 6 months, 12 months. You know, they might overshoot by a couple of weeks or 4 weeks on sort of smaller applications. Larger applications have always been a huge challenge. You know, if you've got a site for 200 homes, it would often take six months to get through that, but you know, it's to be expected. And it's always been the way, and especially when there's a lot to consider, lots of stakeholders to sort of please as you go through that process. But yeah, for a householder application or something sort of smaller like that, where, you know, likely, you know, our fees are smaller on that as well, then it's difficult for people to understand. That's all we can do is chip through and work through that process, really.
Yeah. So what's been the implications for your business as a result of that then, if things are taking that longer, and things like cash flow and also?
We used to be able to plan. We used to know that, you know, if we submit 10 planning applications, that 8 of them will come out the other side in about 8 weeks' time and require the technical drawings to be produced. And because build costs also were more predictable.
Yeah.
Clients were more likely to move ahead with them, having had a sort of a budget cost perhaps from a builder or a contractor. And they move forward, but so many go to planning now. You don't know when it's going to get approved. It comes out the other side of planning, and clients are so bemused by how long it's taken, and they just naturally just want to get on and build, because no one can ever imagine how long it's going to take. And I think in clients' heads, they sort of seem to think it's a 3-month journey getting their plans into place. And naturally, it's probably 5-6 months if you sort of do it properly and take a reasonable sort of pace and add a lot of detail to the tender process. So yeah, I think that's the challenge. We can't sort of predict and pencil in sort of staff, knowing that we've got what we've got coming through the pipeline on the delivery side.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking forward to the future then, Paul, 3 years in, what's the plans, aspirations for the business going forward? And talking about challenges, do you see new challenges on top of what you've already been describing?
I think there's obviously challenges with the economy. I think prices of stock rocketing. They're not going up at the rate that they were. Everybody knows roughly how it's expensive to build, and that's that. The challenges always remain in planning. I don't see that improving at all. It's a political football for the government. Got a new election coming up, so yet again they'll come up with some daft ideas which aren't deliverable, and it'll be challenged through planning law, and then the fun begins again. I think with development, since the interest rate's gone up, development finance, many deals don't sort of stack. You need sort of minimum 25% margin for the banks to lend on it. They're very risk averse, and they'll often sort of move the goalposts. For the developers, many of our developer clients have had to go back and find more money, more cash to put into the deal on something which actually stacks up really well. And you think, what's going on? So yeah, everything seems the interest rates have sort of calmed down a bit. Things are sort of starting to improve, I think.
Great.
Which is good. So yeah, I think new opportunities will come up on the market. There's a lot more sort of plots of land coming up for sale. But yeah, there's always opportunities for people who've got the pockets to do it.
Yeah. So hopefully some good demand for your architectural services then.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So
and Paul, before we started recording this, you had also mentioned about challenges around people as well, and your solution to that's been with hiring like an apprentice. I thought that was quite interesting, perhaps to share with our network of people.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose one of our USPs, I suppose, is that we don't all of our designs are done in 3D, and we use a software which has been around for 30 years, one of the pioneering softwares, but I suppose it's not the Microsoft of the industry.
Right.
Very good, but having that sort of unique selling benefit, I suppose, comes at the cost of you can't find staff that typically trained on it. So yeah, it's difficult to find talented staff and recruit the right people for the business going forward anyway. When the business grows, we change our sort of dynamic as well, and who we're working with. So those skill sets need to be diverse, So yeah, we've actually found it quite successful growing by training staff as graduates and helping them to grow. So one of the things we'll look for in the future is the new sort of government scheme for apprenticeships.
Right.
So now offering those in architecture, which is new this year, and seems like a great way to offer a fantastic opportunity for a young person to have their degree paid for by the government. I think it's something like 95% of it was paid by them.
Great.
For us to grow someone into the sort of skills that we need within the business. So,
brilliant. So that's part of the way to make it all, bring it together and grow the business in the future. That's exciting.
Yeah, homegrown people.
Homegrown. Yeah. So Paul, when you look back at all of your experience, you mentioned 20 years before starting the business, is there one, if you were to choose one lesson that you feel you've learned about being in business or starting up, what would that be?
I suppose it's having a business plan and knowing and being quite clear about where you're heading, and then specifically recruiting and being quite picky about, because your first employee is the most important. And it's an important sort of role. And then building upon that is I can't emphasize enough really how important it is to take on the right people for the business, and how important it is to build that sort of small sort of team in the direction you want it to go in. And if they're not the right person, then bide your time and just wait for that right person to come along, I think is
not
probably
beats.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't. It's never been like that anyway. But I think just be quite clear about what you want, I think.
Great. And then Paul, it's a slightly similar question, but different in another way, because I want you to go back to when you were 18. If you were setting out in business as 18-year-old Paul, is there any one piece of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
Dive in with both feet. Take risks, try different things, make the most of sort of having no family commitments, living at home, and so on. It's you've got the world is at your fingertips. Just travel, make the most of the opportunity. Really, it's and fail and start all over again if you want to, because you can. It's a lot more difficult the more commitments you have.
Yeah, we were chatting about that, weren't we? Saying how it is harder if you get those commitments and start a family and you've got mortgage, and if you don't have that 18, which most people don't, then make the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So Paul, whether it's looking back or looking forward, what inspires you to keep doing what you're doing?
I love what I do. Advising clients to sort of on what's a creative and complex process. Finally seeing those buildings through to fruition, and then catching up with families or clients in years to come to see how those projects have actually worked in the real world as a functioning business or home or education setting. It's important. That's a legacy, I guess. We're not making something which will be obsolete in 5 years. It's going to be there for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And so we may as well do it well.
I can imagine looking around all the local town and seeing everything that you've had a hand in must be very rewarding.
It's nice.
Excellent. So then lastly, Paul, is there any news that you want to share with us about PMG Architecture going forward?
Yeah, we've got a couple of projects on at the moment. So we've got 2 projects at top of town in Basingstoke, and we're converting the former HSBC bank on London Street into 16 flats. Having lived in Basingstoke my whole life, it means something to me. It's nice to see and be part of that investment in the high street in a time when it desperately needs it. And I think there's a huge sort of change about to come really with the high street. It's in a point where people are out the back of the pandemic able to sort of work flexibly in a hybrid sort of environment. And do we need the same sort of office space as we used to have? Is it more of a flexible office space? Do we need more gyms? Do we need more different facilities to what does the high street look like? And Basingstoke's got a new sort of master plan which they've spent a small fortune on, which gives their opinion of what they think the high street should be. But at the end of the day, anything's better than an empty unit which has just a negative downturn impact and the businesses around it. So that's on site and it'll be completed this summer. But with the same clients also instructed us to develop the Royal Bank of Scotland at the other end of the high street. So we've put in a scheme for that to be converted to 20 flats. So I think having a more sort of lived in town centre where yes, there isn't parking, but with all of the facilities on the doorstep, it's only going to encourage more life in the town and help carve the new sort of way forward for the high street. So it'll be interesting.
Sounds really exciting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Something a bit different. Well, Paul, it's been fascinating chatting with you today about the business that you've set up and the challenges that you've described and that perhaps are out there in the future as well, and how you're navigating the economy and what the government does. So it's been a fascinating insight into your world. So thank you so much for spending time and sharing this with our Business Spotlight Network.
Super. Thanks ever so much, Natalie. Thanks for having me.